At the edge of the Bay of Naples, beneath the silent slopes of Mount Vesuvius, stood Pompeii. To its people, the mountain was part of the landscape, green, familiar, and almost comforting. But beneath that peaceful surface, the earth was holding a force powerful enough to erase an entire city from the living world. Pompeii was not a forgotten outpost. It was a busy Roman city filled with voices, footsteps, trade, and ambition. Along its stone streets, merchants opened shops, carts moved between buildings, and citizens passed fountains and painted walls, surrounded by the ordinary rhythm of Roman life. Behind the walls of the city's finest homes, Pompeii revealed its wealth in color. Frescoes covered rooms with scenes of gods, gardens, myths, and family pride. Courtyards brought light into private spaces, while household shrines reminded every family that the gods were part of daily life. In the markets, Pompeii breathed with the energy of commerce. Bakers sold fresh bread, traders weighed produce, fish sellers shouted over crowded stalls, and customers moved through narrow streets with baskets in hand. This was a city connected to the farms, vineyards, roads, and ports of the Roman world. At the heart of Pompeii stood the Forum, a place of law, politics, religion, and business. Temples, columns, and public buildings framed the open square, where citizens gathered to argue, trade, worship, and be seen. It was the stage on which the city displayed its identity. Pompeii also knew spectacle. In its amphitheater, crowds gathered for public entertainment, cheering beneath the sun while the mountain watched in silence beyond the city. Roman life celebrated power, drama, and display, unaware that a greater spectacle was waiting beneath the earth. For generations, Vesuvius appeared to sleep. Its slopes were green, its outline familiar, and its danger misunderstood. To many who lived beneath it, the mountain was not a warning. It was a backdrop to farms, villas, streets, and homes. But the earth had spoken before. Tremors shook walls, cracked stone, and sent lamps swinging in the dark. Pottery fell, dust rose, and people steadied themselves against familiar walls. In a region used to earthquakes, warning signs could feel less like prophecy and more like life as usual. Then came a day that began like any other. Shops opened, workers stepped into the streets, meals were prepared, and families moved through their routines. The city was alive, ordinary, and unaware that history was about to divide Pompeii into a before and an after. Above Vesuvius, the first unmistakable sign rose into the sky. A dark column climbed higher and higher, spreading outward like the crown of a strange tree. People stopped in the streets and looked up. What began as curiosity soon turned into fear. Ash and pumice began to fall over Pompeii. At first it may have seemed strange, then troubling, then impossible to ignore. Streets turned gray, roofs collected weight, and the familiar city became an uncertain world of dust, noise, and confusion. Inside homes, families faced choices that no one had expected to make. Some reached for coins, jewelry, documents, and household treasures. Others gathered food, lamps, and simple things they thought might help them survive. In those hurried moments, ordinary possessions became the last evidence of ordinary lives. Many people chose the roads out of Pompeii. They moved with carts, animals, bundles, and whatever they could carry. The way out was slow and frightening, but for some, the early hours of the disaster offered a chance to escape the city before it was sealed. Others stayed behind. Some hoped the falling ash would stop. Some sheltered in familiar rooms, believing stone walls could protect them. Some may have waited for relatives or feared the roads beyond the city. Pompeii's final hours were shaped not only by nature, but by human uncertainty. Across the Bay of Naples, Pliny the Younger watched the strange cloud rise over Vesuvius. His later account would become one of the most important eyewitness descriptions of a volcanic eruption from the ancient world. From a distance, he saw the sky darken over a city he could not save. Pliny the Elder, commander of the Roman fleet, moved toward the danger. Ships prepared to cross the bay as ash filled the air and the sea grew uneasy. His mission was driven by duty, curiosity, and the hope of rescue, as the eruption transformed the coast into a place of chaos. Back in Pompeii, the weight above the city grew heavier. Ash and pumice pressed onto roofs, filled streets, and buried courtyards. Buildings that had stood for generations strained beneath the load, while the shapes of daily life disappeared under a silent gray covering. Night came without stars. The ash blocked the sky, and inside darkened rooms, small flames became the only islands of light. Fear settled over the city. The sounds of normal life faded, replaced by the weight of waiting and the unknown. Then the mountain unleashed its final force. Vast volcanic clouds surged down the slopes, carrying heat, ash, and destruction across the landscape. From a distance, the eruption was a vision of overwhelming power, nature breaking through the illusion of human control. When the force passed, Pompeii was silent. Streets, homes, temples, and workshops were buried beneath volcanic debris. The living city had vanished, but in its disappearance, something extraordinary happened. Pompeii was sealed away from time. Years became centuries. The buried city faded from memory, hidden beneath earth, ash, and new life on the surface above. Walls, rooms, tools, paintings, and streets remained below, waiting in darkness as the world changed above them. When Pompeii began to emerge again, it changed the way people looked at the ancient world. Excavators uncovered streets, houses, painted rooms, and objects left behind in moments of urgency. The city was not only a ruin, it was a preserved fragment of Roman life. Pompeii speaks through details. A wall painting, a bread oven, a clay jar, a doorway, a street worn by wheels and footsteps. These traces remind us that history is not only made of emperors and battles, but of homes, meals, work, fear, hope, and memory. Today, Pompeii stands as both a warning and a gift. It reminds us that civilization can feel permanent while standing on fragile ground, and that the past can survive in the most unexpected ways. Beneath the shadow of Vesuvius, the city still tells its story. Subscribe to the channel and join the History Storytellers for cinematic history documentaries and journeys into the past.